Good morning. My name is Melinda. Welcome to Web of Stories, and this is my take 2 of my weekly wrap-up. I did an entire video, and I went off on a tangent of something that I talked about last week that involved Edvard II that I didn't need to revisit. So we're going to just scrap that video, and I'm going to stay away from that particular topic. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go see last week's wrap-up where I talk about this thing. Anyway, housekeeping stuff. First of all, welcome, because I have a lot of new subscribers, so welcome. I am so glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask me anything you want. Speaking of comments, this is where I'm getting with this. I am caught up with my comments as of right now, my recent comments, but I have a bunch of old comments that I'm slowly working through. It's not that I have not seen these comments, it's just that I hadn't done anything with them. Usually because I get the alert for the comment on my email and then I can't really do anything on it. So I'm just going through them. So if you get a red heart notification on a comment that you left months ago, that's why. Just telling you that's happening. Second of all, I want to share this mug with you. See it? And I got this from Greg. It's supposedly fun. He has a merch store and I will link that as well as his channel down below. I actually wanted to share this mug with you a couple weeks ago because I had ordered it the day he announced he had a merch store. I had gone on to his merch store. He had a bunch of t-shirts and I was like, I shouldn't buy t-shirts because my t-shirt drawer is full. But he had mugs. So I'm like, oh, great. And I always get the 15-ounce mugs. And they had a 20-ounce mug. This is what I call a Monday morning mug. This is huge. I love this. Greg has a thing he says about short books. He says, you could dunk it in your coffee. You could dunk War and Peace in this, just saying. What happened was a couple weeks ago, I had come to my front door and there was a box wrapped in fragile tape that was squashed. And I said, that doesn't look good. And I picked it up and it kind of jangled. And I said, that doesn't sound good. And then I opened it up and it was this, but in pieces. And I was very disappointed. So, because I was looking forward to this mug. And I immediately got on and I emailed the platform that Greg uses for his merch. And they immediately got back to me and said, we're so sorry, that shouldn't have happened. We'll send you a new one. And I got it. So I wanted to point out, this has nothing to do with Greg. This has nothing to do with that platform because their customer service was excellent. It has everything to do with UPS. That was so clearly marked as fragile. There's no excuse for that. Anyway, that's my sort of frustration with it. So yes, go get a really, really big mug so you can have your Monday morning coffee, even though I'm filming this on a Friday morning. And you'll be seeing this, or this will go up on May 31st, which means tomorrow, as you see this, will be June. And I was just thinking this morning on what a wonderful reading month June is. There's 4 events that I was going to do all 4 of them, but planning wise, something happened, so I couldn't do one of them. But we have Big Book Summer, which I'm a co-host of. Read Historical Fiction 2025, which I'm a co-host of. Pride Reading, and June on the Range. June on the Range is the one that I'm not doing this year only because I was going to do a buddy read of Lonesome Dove with a friend, and then I scheduled stuff and it just didn't happen. I may still do Lonesome Dove this summer, but just not in June. It's all my fault. But what's really great about these 4 challenges or these 4 reading events is they all work great together. Big Book Summer. It's a book of at least 400 pages. If you are a fantasy reader, all of your books are big books as far as I can tell. That's easy. It's easy. You have whole summer to do it. You don't even have to do it just in June. You can do it anytime during the summer. If you do June on the Range, most Westerns are historical fiction, which means you're doing read historical fiction without even knowing it. There. And then there's so many great books with some queer representation. Now I know that books exist that meet all 4 of those. They're at least 400 pages, historical, Western, queer representation. If you know of them, let me know down below because I will read it next year in June. I could not think of one, but I do have some other, this is not a formal sort of recommendation video, but I was thinking about this, some sort of, mashup of these challenges. Like if you wanted to read a big book historical Western, you could read Lonesome Dove. If you wanted to read a big book with queer rep historical fiction, you could read Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. If you wanted to read a Western, although this one is not historical, which I'll get to that, and it's not big. It's actually a novella. But a Western with queer rep. You could read Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey, which is a novella, and it's a dystopian, so it's set in a future, but it's a Western, it's a future Western, because they had made things great again. And and it's about renegade lesbian librarians. So there's so many great books. I mean, this is like the easiest month if you want to do reading events, because you could just hit them all super easily. But anyway, if you know one that hits all 4 of those, put it down below for me, because I know they exist. I just can't think of one. Now, to my reading. I finished 4 books this week, and I'm going to try to not go off on tangents on a couple of them. That was another problem with the earlier video. The first one I finished, I'm not going to talk too much about, because after I film this, I'm going to film a dedicated video to this book, and I don't want to like give you everything in this video, but I finished Giants in the Earth by Ola Edvart Rolvaag, or O.A. Rolvaag. This is, I consider, an overlooked great American novel, one of the great American novels that is overlooked. It is the story of Norwegian immigrants, written by a Norwegian immigrant. This book was originally written Norwegian, and then the author and someone else translated it into English. Norwegian immigrants settling in the Dakota Territory, written maybe 50 years after the fact. This was published in 1920. When was this published? I have it here. One second here. Welcome back. You didn't need to see me scroll through my webpage. This was published in 1925, and I think it takes place in the 1870s. So it's historical. It's clearly historical, but it's close. It was written close to the time. But I'm not going to get too much into it. I did this as a double buddy read. So I did buddy read it with 2 people, like separately, parallel. I read it, did a Voxer buddy read with commenter Christina. We've done a lot of buddy reads. She's like a buddy read pal of mine. And then I did a Storygraph buddy read with Hannah at Savage Reads, which was fun too. And I loved hearing, we had great discussions both times. Again, I'm trying not to go say too much about this because I'm putting another video out about it. But if you're interested in this, watch the video. I don't know when that video is going to come out. I need to look at my calendar and see where I have someplace where I can schedule it, but it will be out within a month. Okay. The second book I finished is for Maria Andrea at Books and Bocadillos, her book club, and it was this month's book, which I had to differentiate because earlier this month I read last month's book because scheduling was weird. Night at the Fiesta by Kirstin Valdez Quade, not Kristen. I've been calling her Kristen. It's Kirstin. It's just a short story collection, mostly contemporary. Nearly all are set in New Mexico. I found these stories really strong. This is a really strong collection. With just about every short story collection, there's stories you like more than others. This is this is the same thing. But most of the stories I really liked in here. And even the ones that didn't, that maybe didn't hit as well with me, I still liked them. They just weren't as strong as the other ones. I do want to give one quick trigger warning for here. There's a story in here called The Guest House. If you have, if you don't like to read about things happening to animals, I would skip that one. Yeah. But because I didn't know that, I would, ooh, yeah. And I'm not usually even that affected by that, and I was in this one. But yes, very strong. I would love to read more by this author. I don't know if she has any novels. It looks like she might just be a short story author. I don't know, but really strong. Maria Andrea's book club focuses on Latinx authors. They're all Latina this year, but Latinx, and obviously Kirstin Valdez Quade falls into that population as well. And her stories, focus around that as well. Really strong, really enjoyed it, highly recommended. The next one I finished, I'm really torn on. And this is the only AAPI book I read in May. I wanted to read more, but I just was overbooked. Overbooked. But this is The Wanderer's Curse by Jennifer Hope Choi. There are things I really liked about this book. She's a really good writer. She's a really good writer. She also is, and I've talked about this before, one of the traps I think memoirists fall into is for no other, I mean, this is maybe not the best term for it, but I call it they're the heroes of their own stories. Like they can do nothing wrong. It's just a level of honesty that maybe they don't get with themselves. That happens frequently, not always, but frequently in memoirs. I see that. She does not fall into that trap. When I was reading this book, I was very, very interested in what I was reading. So yeah, I would recommend it completely on those. But I had some issues with it. The first one is, I'm going to read, and I've done this before, but I'm just going to read the first little bit of the summary here. In 2022, Jennifer Hope Choi stumbled upon the concept of yoke masal, a supposedly inheritable affliction that causes one to roam far from home. When Choi asked her Korean mother about the curse, Uma replied nonchalantly, "Oh yeah, I have that." So that's what I thought this book was about. It's called The Wanderer's Curse. That's not what this book's about. That doesn't even come into play until like the last quarter of the book. And Choi has stuff to talk about. She does have things to say. It's not like she kills, 250 pages before she gets to the point. That's not the case. She has a lot to say. I kind of felt like she had written this memoir, and her editor said, "Okay, we need a hook. We found this one thing. We're going to market it as this." And so they tried to put this square peg in a round hole that way. That's kind of what I felt like. So that was frustrating, just expectations. A step beyond that, I did feel that sometimes, because she does have a lot of, this is really a story of like self-discovery and self-acceptance. And that's all through the book. That's what that is. But I did feel unfocused at times. And I was thinking, first of all, I think that the marketing is an issue, but I also was thinking another option they could have done with this book to make it more successful is, instead of it just being a straight prose memoir, to have it be a memoir and essays. And then you could still keep the same title, because that could be the essay called The Wanderer's Curse. Because then she could focus more on these different areas. Like she talks about, the model minority expectation and how she doesn't feel she fits in it. She talks about just trying to find her way in her life after her experience in her family, reconciling herself to a Korean American heritage. There's a lot of different issues going on. And I think maybe if it had been focused in essays, that might have made this a stronger book. So I'm really up in the air. She's a great writer, and I do recommend this book for that. I just think that there's some issues with it. I should also say this is an advanced reader's copy. There usually isn't that much difference between the advanced reader's copy and a finished copy, but there could be some. So what if you get a finished copy and you say, this is not at all what you're talking about? That might be the case. So there's that. And then finally, and this is where I'm going to contain myself so I don't go off on the tangent I went on last week, because no one needs to hear that again. I finished Queens of the Age of Chivalry. England's Medieval Queens, Book 3 by Alison Weir. I have become a little Alison Weir fan. The first book was Queens of the Conquest, which I read last year for Historathon Q2. Book 2 was Queens of the Crusades, which I read earlier in this quarter. And so now we're into Queens of the Age of Chivalry. So here we talk about, it's the queens basically. And as I've said, I have a degree in history. So this is all stuff I know, but I don't know it from the female point of view. And I felt like this was a book in two parts. And this is not a criticism of it. It's just the way history is. A book in two parts. Because we start with, we actually start with Marguerite of France. So Marguerite of France married Edward I after his wife, his long-term, very beloved wife died. So she was just his wife right at the end, sort of his life. And she was actually a contemporary of his children. So, it was interesting, but that really wasn't it. The next one we get is Isabella of France, who is the queen to Edward II. I'm going to contain myself here. We'll go there. So and I didn't know this. I knew this. This is a major part of British history about Isabella of France, as her role in deposing her husband and putting her son on the throne and all that. That's all there. But she was a character. And, if you are someone who says, I can't read history is boring, pick this book up and even just read the section on Isabella of France. And that will prove you wrong, because, oh boy, that woman. And then we go to Philippa of Hainaut, who was the wife of Edward III. So that is the son of Edward II, and Isabella of France, the one that when she deposed Edward II, he became king as a child and she was the regent. And then Edward III's son was Edward the Black Prince, so he predeceased his father. So following Edward III's son was Richard II. Following Edward III, we have Richard II, which is the surviving son of Edward the Black Prince. So then we have his two wives, Anne of Bohemia, who died childless relatively young. She was like 28. And then he married Isabella of Valois, who was a child. I mean, she at the time he died, which we're not really sure exactly when he died because it's a little hazy, she was 12. She was at the oldest 12. So we're talking child bride. That's who we cover in this. And it's this focus. I see what her focus on this was. I think she did this a really strong way, is that the focus was really on, you had Isabella of France doing her thing. And then it was a recovery of Isabella of France to this more accepted view of queen consorts. And then she ends it with like, well, and then we get into the next century, which that is the fourth book, which will be released in December. And that's the Queens of War. My one thing about this book, again, I'm going to contain myself. We're going back to Edward II, and I will not go into the details of his death again. But she goes into this, I'm going to call it a conspiracy theory. I think others would argue with me that it's not really a conspiracy theory, but there is this theory out there that Edward II did not die in the way that is so well known. That he had switched outfits with a guard of his and then was able to escape. And it was the guard who was the one who was killed in that way. And Alison Weir seems to really buy into that theory. I will say, given the evidence that she presents and what we know of the personality of Edward II through what she presents, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I can see why it would be a thing that was out there that people believe might have happened. I can see that. But I just don't think it really happened. I think that she gave it probably a little more credence than it called for. Also, it did not make me like Edward II anymore. I'm just going to say it, like, Edward II was never like a great king in my mind. He very short, and I won't go into that one thing. He was bisexual, and he had maybe more than two, but two notable favorites. The first one was Piers Gaveston, who was early in his marriage to Isabella. Isabella was still a child at this time. And he was just very, I mean, yes, as a favorite, Piers got a lot of benefits and all this, but it was just made people really uncomfortable. He was very open about it. And it basically kind of ended up, they kept banishing Piers, and finally they caught him and they cut his head off. They like to cut people's heads off. And then later, then there was a period of time when he and Isabella had a very loving marriage. And they had several children. I think they had 4 or 5, something like that. And then another favorite comes, Hewlett Spencer, who was very devious, very power hungry, and really behaved in ways that were despicable. So whether you want to put Edward II under his umbrella of despicability, or you just want to say Edward II just really was easily swayed, either way, he does not come off as a good king in my mind. But if you sets up some sort of, I don't know, situation to benefit yourself, to escape yourself, to give yourself some benefit, and someone else dies from it, that's it for me. Like, you're terrible. That's like the worst thing a leader can do. One of the worst things a leader can do, because someone else lost their life innocently for a benefit for yourself. So really no love lost between me and Edward II. But anyway, really enjoyed this, even if I had that little, didn't quite buy Alison Weir's little take on Edward II there. And I made it all the way through this without talking about that thing. Again, see last week's video if you want to know. But yes, I enjoyed this. I am very much looking forward to reading the next one, which I will be getting in December, but reading in Q2 of next year. I'm currently reading, I don't usually go into my current reads unless I don't have anything else to talk about, which is what happened last week. If you want to know what I'm currently reading, I put it all down below. But I am currently reading, as a buddy read with commenter Abby, Catherine of Aragon by Alison Weir, which is historical fiction. And it's the first historical fiction I've read by Alison Weir. And reading the two at the same time, which I hadn't really planned, it just worked that way. it impacted my reading of Catherine of Aragon. I think it might have impacted it in a positive way, which I will talk more about that next week because I plan to actually finish Catherine of Aragon today or tomorrow. But talk about that. It's interesting. Can't think of another author. Well, no, I can. There have been authors where I've read their nonfiction and their fiction, but in a sort of historical sense, that sort of historical scholarship, and then also have historical fiction. I can't think of another author I've read like that. There are authors who do that. I just haven't read them. But yeah, so that's where I am with that. That is my week. Please go check out Greg's channel. Check out his merch store. Check out the Monday morning mug, as I call it. And you can get them with different things. You can get t-shirts with this, or you can get mugs with this, or different designs on it. Please join us for one of the many events going on in June. And again, if you know that unicorn book, which is over 400 pages, queer rep, Western historical, put it down below so I can read it next year. And yeah, like, subscribe, join my Discord, and I will put I will also put all the co-hosts to all the events that I'm co-hosting, which would be Big Book Summer, which I'm co-hosting with Sue. Sue started it. And then Read Historical Fiction, which is started by Shelley Swearingen. And then I'm co-hosting it with her, and Charlotte at Quade Reads, and Brittany at Literally Smitten, and Gloria Z. Thompson. We're all a co-host. I'll put all that down below, so you can go check them out too. Yeah. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Adios.